This week, using the JSTOR database, I further explored one of my favorite topics, the effectiveness of military air power. In 1921, Italian aviation pioneer General Giulio Douhet published what became the de facto holy grail of the world's air forces, the command of the air, which forecast the concept and envisioned results of what ultimately became known as strategic bombing well before there was any technical capability to actually do so. That topic is still hotly debated today. The references selected for this particular study varied in their scope, but all addressed the issue of the development and effectiveness in the use of both tactical and strategic air power in various military conflicts. Historian Tammy Biddle, for example, a history professor at the U.S. Army War College, provides an overview of the use of U.S. air power from World War I through the present. In the scope of her work, she describes the application of air power and provides military assessments of its effectiveness. While there may be some biases as an Army historian, she concludes that while strategic application of air power had positive effect, the tactical interaction of air power and land or naval forces had much more. Using the D-Day invasion as one example, she notes that the tactical destruction by air of many northwestern French rail lines, which interfered with the large-scale transfer of German troops to the beachheads of Normandy, contributed significantly to the success of the invasion. In other references selected, the authors focused on more recent specific conflicts and the overall role of air power in each. Authors Byman and Waxman focused on the only war ever fought and won solely by the application of air power, namely that of Kosovo in the late 1990s. And while they concluded forces were ever used, that no land forces were ever used, and there was not a single action-related casualty in the attacking force, despite outward appearances to the contrary, other forces were compulsive and more compulsive than air power alone and responsible for the victory. Issues such as the collapse of the Soviet Union and the inability and unwillingness of the new Russian leadership to come to the aid of the Serbs were heavily influential factors. In addition, NATO was organizing a very visible ground campaign and threatening to use it at some point. That possibility, coupled with the lack of any visible external military or material support, is what Byman and Waxman actually contributed the Serbian capitulation to NATO demands. Author Robert Papp delves into the first Iraq War, where a 6-week strategic air campaign preceded the start of ground action. Using prevailing Air Force strategic concepts, the air campaign consisted of targeting command, control, communication facilities, high-value targets including government officials, manufacturing centers, distribution centers, and critical infrastructure. As Iraq was a fairly decentralized and less developed industrial society, those attacks are claimed by the authors to have made relatively minor reductions in Iraq's capability of conducting war. What did work, however, was the coordinated air attacks on the Iraqi army along with the ground offensive. In other words, a combined arms assault. The air attacks on the Iraqi army, coupled with tactical control of the airspace above the battlefield, per Douhet's 1911 theories, destroyed the ability of the Iraqi army to fight and caused panic and desertion. Up to 50% of Iraqi troops fled the battle without a fight through either desertion or surrender. The conclusions contained in all three of these references, describing the history of the development and application of air power, particularly strategic air power, came to the same conclusions. Namely, strategically applied air power is not as effective in coercing an enemy population to capitulate as proponents claim.